Star Trek III: The Search for Spock introduced us to the Excelsior. Its basic design reflected the legacy of the Enterprise. The saucer-shaped primary hull connected to a cylindrical secondary hull by a dorsal, and from out of that secondary hull sprouted twin engine nacelles. Was it an improvement over the Constitution class? Which one was the better design? The period from the late 1970s to the late 1980s was a boom time for starship design in Star Trek. I personally do not believe the period has since been matched. Be that as it may, in this video we shall consider the design of two classes of starship from this era, the Constitution II class and the Excelsior class. We will judge them based on first, aesthetic grounds, and second, practicality, before reaching a conclusion. Note that we are not judging them based on their capabilities in universe. And if you like this video, please press that like button, share the video, and subscribe to this channel. If you don't like it, well, that's what the dislike button is for, but subscribe anyway. It seems impossible to not get a beauty shot of the model. No matter the angle, the design looks good. The Enterprise design is one of correct proportion and symmetry. There is a sense of balance. From the side, we can see the lowest portion of the keel, for want of a better word, is halfway down the length of the ship. The swept-back nacelle pylons suggest speed. The Enterprise is pleasing to the eye, its individual component parts brought together in a harmonious whole. Someone once pointed out to me that the ends of the nacelles are reminiscent of a woman's outstretched foot. This may well be overstating the case, as we can equally suppose that the wings of a Cadillac Eldorado are just as valid an inspiration. There is a sense with the Constitution II class that any effort to change the design can only make the result a mere variant of the better original, which brings us to the Excelsior. The Excelsior also has a great number of beauty shot angles, but these are weaker from particular angles. There are too many straight lines when the ship is viewed from above. The long nacelles are fine when viewed from the sides, but from above their very straight lines run parallel to the straight lines of the engineering hull, creating too much repetition. This is rectified by the Enterprise B with its more flared redesign. A modern and sleek starship was what the designers wanted, and like the Enterprise, there is balance. The Excelsior was designed by William George and Nilo Rodas, with model maker George wondering what a Japanese-designed Enterprise would have looked like. I'm reasonably certain George was thinking of the Japanese aesthetics of the 1980s or even of the late 1970s, but even that aesthetic has a pedigree. Not being an expert on Japanese aesthetics, I must tread carefully, but I think one possibility is that known as Miyabi. From what I understand, this is concerned with refinement and elegance, which brings to mind the words of John Eves, who described the Excelsior as having power, elegance, and beauty. The Excelsior has always struck me as having an element of sophistication over the Enterprise, and even a particular aristocratic air in its design. But perhaps that was just Captain Styles. Certain aspects of the design are exaggerated, such as the thin, stretched secondary hull, and the massive impulse engines, which lend the saucer section a sports car's spoiler. Indeed, the Excelsior has two fins on top of the impulse housing, which were removed for the Enterprise B refit. If we remove the impulse structure, the Excelsior would not look right at all. Another notable feature of the Excelsior is the rather fetching hooded deflector dish. It really ought to give the Excelsior a fat-cheeked look, but instead it makes the Enterprise's dish seem utilitarian in comparison. A steam train can be an object both of beauty and functionality, as can a vintage car. A tall ship can inspire wonder and be beautiful, elegant, and entirely practical. and who knows, perhaps one day we will return to the use of sail. Star Trek, though, presents us with hypothetical designs, shapes for things that do not exist. We have spacecraft, but not aircraft carrier-sized interstellar starships. Neither the Enterprise nor the Excelsior exist as independent objects outside of the fictitious Star Trek universe, and as fictitious objects, they do not have to adhere to the realities of space travel in the same manner as a real spacecraft. This opens the design up to a certain degree of creativity, but also to a certain degree of aestheticism, of art for art's sake. For example, when Star Trek was first being developed in the mid-1960s, one initial design for the Enterprise included a spherical primary hull, the sphere being more conducive to space travel than a saucer. The less practical saucer, though, won out. The Enterprise filming model built for the motion picture was reportedly difficult to use. The weight of the nacelles on those swept-back pylons must have troubled the post-production team no end. Then there is the dorsal, or neck, of the ship, but as we have already looked at the issues surrounding turbolifts in the Enterprise's dorsal, we won't revisit those subjects here. The Excelsior's wider dorsal solves many of the downsides of that of the Enterprise. There is space for 2 torpedo rooms, as well as torpedo magazines. There is room for structural support and bracing between the saucer section and the engineering hulls. A vertical intermix chamber would not interfere with turbolift shafts. As for the nacelle pylons, these are more practical, although it must be said that they join the engineering hull not directly, but through this elongated dome. An elongated dome, moreover, that is situated where the secondary hull is almost at its thinnest, and therefore at its weakest. Which is the better design, the Enterprise or the Excelsior? Well, we might call the Enterprise a work of art. We might also call the Excelsior a more practical expression of that work of art. It all depends on what you want from your starship, or indeed from Star Trek itself. If it is what Star Trek is meant to be, namely entertainment with good, thoughtful stories, then practicality is far less important. Science fiction, though, is by its very nature extraordinary. The bar for suspension of disbelief is higher, and so it requires more practicality. Which would you choose? Because the aesthetic is so iconic, I choose the Enterprise, but only just.